All right. Well, hey everyone. Thanks for jumping on. And I know Christina, and I know she has some super public speaking skills already because that's what she does every day as a teacher. And Morgan, it sounds like you have some experience as well. So
Yeah.
um, that's awesome. As I said before, like my goal with this is to kind of share some of my tips and tricks for public speaking. But I think that, as a skill, it's something that we are always working on and developing and things like that. So I'm just going to share a little bit, and then hopefully we can kind of have some conversation and dialogue with it as well. That sounds good. So just to kind of give you some background information on me, I actually have a degree in psychology and currently work as the executive director of the Manchester Area Chamber of Commerce. I also serve on the Western Dubuque School Board and am the community coordinator for grade level reading in Dyersville. So with all of those roles, there's different public speaking opportunities that come up, whether it's in front of a group of a couple hundred, down to a smaller group or a row of people. But I just want to start out by saying I really have no formal training in public speaking. So I just want to let you know that, kind of going into this is just more of my perspective, what I've picked up. But I think that that's really important because everything that we do, I believe in life is something that we kind of use and build on our experiences and use for something further down the road. So just to start off, when you think of public speaking, who comes to mind? Are there certain people? Are there reasons that you want to get better? For example, some people, when they think of public speakers, they might think of people on TV. Other things right now, I know TED Talks are a really big thing. So whenever I am looking to grow in my public speaking skills, sometimes I'll go and check out some of my favorite TED Talk artists or speakers to see how they're doing it, how they start the conversation. Or maybe it's just because you just want to, have a work promotion or just build your skills that way. So I guess to start off, do either of you have people that you would say you look up to or that you think of when you hear public speaking that you kind of go to as your role models in that?
Just before anybody jumps in quick, I will remind everybody that there is a chat option down below. So if you want to, you can leave comments that way and we'll address them in between talking points.
Yeah, good call. Thanks, Paul. So like I said, for me, it's a lot of times just people I really look up to. So I like Brene Brown's TED Talks. Just because she's very full of wisdom. She gets a lot of information out there. I can really learn from them, but it's also really conversational. So either of you have anyone that you go to or look up to?
I was actually going to mention Brene Brown. She's pretty awesome. I really like Sonia Renee Taylor. She's also pretty great. And I actually like comedians. I know it's a little bit of a different, public speaking, not necessarily exactly what a person would assume when they think of public speaking, but there can be a lot of advocacy work even if it's comedy.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point to make. So actually, that's a really great segue into my next comment is that they're all different. So I love your idea of the comedian because it's so interesting to me. Like when you listen to different people, you can have really great speakers, but they all do it in a little bit different manner. And so that is one thing that I think for me is like number one most important thing when people are growing their public speaking skills. I think it's the most important thing is just to know like they're all going to be different. They are unique because they as a person are unique. And so really keeping that in mind. So my case in point with this, just some background information. I used to work in Dubuque, and I was really involved with the Dubuque Young Professionals, which is a really great organization. They have well over 1,000 young professionals that are engaged, and just a lot of opportunities to get involved and grow your professional skills and things like that. But one thing that I noticed when there would be different people that would be speaking is you could tell who was trained in it, and they were trained a certain way. So I don't want to like pick on any of them at all, because I think they all do have their pros and cons. But the one that sticks in my mind, it was someone that was training under Toastmasters. And like I said, not that that's wrong by any means, but I think through his training, he was so focused on how to do it the Toastmaster style that it became really robotic. And he really lost a sense of his own uniqueness, which made it just kind of awkward then. And so I'm a really big believer in we're all made uniquely, we're all made differently, and that's for a reason. So there are different ways to do public speaking, different ways to engage with people. So that's always one thing that I really want to make sure that I lead off with whenever I'm talking. Usually I talk to students about public speaking, but I think even with adults is a really important thing just to keep in mind. Now, some of my background and just kind of how I got to public speaking, like I said, I don't have any training in it. I think back to my freshman year of high school. It was my very first time having to do what I would say like real public speaking. Our teacher at the time, we had to pick out poetry and we had to memorize it. I remembered something by Emily Dickinson. I don't remember what it was. I think it's Emily Dickinson. That sounds right. But that's what I memorized way back when. And I remember how to memorize it. And then we had to present it to the class. And just that overwhelming sense of dread of what if I forget what I'm going to say, or what if I look ridiculous. So public speaking for me starting out was not something I liked. In fact, I remember later on in high school, we had Mr. Bonebrake was our teacher, and he made us, we had to write our speeches, and then he would record us. And it's totally different when somebody has a camera right in front of you and you are now recording, and you have to go back and watch yourself. Awful. It's like the worst thing ever, right? But it actually is for a really good reason, because you start to kind of pick out some of those nuances. And so even though it was something that I dreaded whenever we had to do it, I think I remember it for a reason. I mean, one, because I'm probably traumatized by it, but in all honesty, really because it was something that I learned from that and really grew from that. One thing I should just point out that I'm always working on is that I tend to talk quickly. So maybe you've noticed that already, that I remember even watching those videos that he would point out, you know, okay, you're talking faster, you need to slow down. So it's just different things like that I think that when you get a chance to give yourself some feedback, that's really positive. Now, my first time professionally public speaking was when I worked for an organization in Dubuque, and I would go into classrooms and would do classroom works with kids around body safety. So for that, it was extremely scripted. I mean, everything I said was completely written out for me. Before I ever went into the classroom, we practiced and all of that. And then I went in and basically went through a memorized script. So, you know, with that, there are some pros and cons. Definitely it got me comfortable because I knew what I was saying. But I was really ready to kind of get past the script and be able to use my own flair, to use my own conversation within that. And so what that has really showed me is that when people say for public speaking, you need to practice, that's really the key thing. And like I said, it's really easy to talk in like a conversation type of thing like this, but when you're presenting and really wanting to use your public speaking skills, practice really is essential. And I would say, for me, I have to read through it a couple times, and then I try to run through it on my own. I don't like to practice around people. I know some people like to practice with their family or their friends, or a mirror or something like that. I like to practice to a wall, just because it's just where I feel more comfortable. But for me, it's more so getting my train of thought, really finalized and getting that out there. So practice does make closer to perfect. I don't want to say practice makes perfect, but it gets you closer there. And then my other big thing is to keep taking those risks. So I have found in my life, and I was never usually like this, but now I'm a person where when there is an opportunity to be a public speaker, to step up and lead something, I like to do that because I know it will give me experience. It's not necessarily because I like to lead or to do public speaking all the time, but I find that it gets me kind of out of my comfort zone. And so whenever you're thinking of, how to do those things, those are some things that I think are pretty general overall. Like I said, getting yourself out there, taking those risks, doing some practices. But I think the number one thing, and actually I talked to some of my friends, and I talked to my husband. He's an introvert. And so I said, what do you think is the key to public speaking? Because I have drug him along and made him do some public speaking gigs with me as well, which he loves, is what I say. But the biggest thing, if I were to tell anybody like to really prepare to do any type of public speaking, is to work on your self-confidence, because you are going to be your worst critic every single time. And so the more that you can really pour on self-love on yourself, you actually realize that that's where most of your anxiety comes from. It's well known that the number one fear that people have, I always think it's funny, it's not even death. Death is not the number one fear. The number one fear is public speaking. And when you think about that, what people are really afraid of is how they're being perceived, how people are going to view them. And so to me, it really comes down to, how are we viewing ourselves? And so I would say the ways that I combat that with public speaking is I really focus on that EQ, so emotional intelligence. And with that, it helps me to kind of reframe my thinking. Anytime that you want to change your thinking pattern, you can't just stop thinking about something. You have to redirect it and think about something else. And so for me, that emotional intelligence is a really big thing. So when I know I have to do public speaking, whether it's, like I said, a group in a classroom size, or it's a group of a couple hundred people, my number one thing is I'm going to know who my audience is, because the more that I feel comfortable with who I'm talking to, I can kind of get myself psyched up or get myself in that zone for that. So with the audience, you have to keep in mind a couple things. First of all, what is the circumstance that you are talking to them about? I think of the last time I did a big group was probably, we did a women's night last fall for the Manchester Chamber. So we had a room of about 400 women, and I was the MC and had to, go through who our nominees were and kind of lay out the ground and try to make it somewhat funny and entertaining, because they had to listen to me for a while. So that type of an audience, a group of women, is really different to when I think about probably the largest audience I ever talked to. I talked to the entire freshman class at Loras College one time. And so being in a room of a couple thousand kids probably, it was a totally different feel. And so also to go to college age students is really interesting. So I have to kind of do some research on who my audience is, because I need to have engagement from them. And to me, engagement means a couple of, or like, it looks different. I guess it doesn't mean a couple different things, but it looks differently. Engagement sometimes is just having that feedback from them, so that they look engaged. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are actively participating or asking questions, but I need to feel that engagement. I'll be really honest. One time I was speaking to a group of teachers, and not in Maquoketa Valley, so that's good. And I was really intrigued because I felt like the group of teachers I was talking to was the least engaged group I'd ever talked to before. And it was really fascinating, because I thought, I'm going to speak to this group of teachers that do public speaking every single day, right? They're always talking. And so it really kind of threw me off, and I had to find a different approach to connect to them. And so I always have to find a way to connect. And so one thing I have found is that I will search until I find it. And that looks different sometimes. Sometimes it's, I'm going to keep telling a story until I feel like it clicks with someone. Sometimes I will start something and realize, okay, we need to start with some humor, or okay, this is a more serious group, so we're going to go this way instead. But I think taking the time in advance to know who my audience is, kind of get a feel for the circumstance, how they're engaging with me, makes me feel more comfortable. And I think it kind of goes into the fact that I go in feeling like I am leading this, and so I have control over it. You can't control ever what anybody else is going to think or feel, but you can control what you think or feel. And so really keeping kind of that mind check as well. So making sure I really know my audience is a really important thing. The other thing is that making sure I know when I'm speaking that I have a beginning, middle, and end. And it seems like a really elementary thing to do. But I don't know if you've ever been to an event or listened to a public speaker before where they don't have an end and they just kind of keep going and you think, oh, okay, they're going to wrap it up now. And no, they're not. They're going to keep going. So whenever you do public speaking, there's kind of a rhythm to it where you can kind of feel like, okay, that was the beginning. Now we're in the real meat of it. And then things are kind of wrapping up. And so I always feel like whenever you hear a speaker and you get faked out by them and you're like, all right, this is wrapping up. And then they fake you out and they're like, actually, no, we're going to go back into it again. For me as a listener, it can turn me off. And so I really try to make sure that I know kind of like I said, my beginning, what the meat of it is, the middle, and then how I'm going to wrap it up. And I think that wrap up piece is really important, but we're not wrapping up yet, just so you know. Because the one thing that I know when I talk to a lot of people, and like I said, we know it's the number one fear why people don't like to do public speaking is because of the nerves. I have some friends that they've told me, like, I can't, I go into full panic attack. Like they can't breathe. It's just completely uncomfortable. You know, for them, I would say, back it up a little bit, start really small, you know, talk to the wall or really plan out what you're going to say, run through it a few times till you get comfortable and kind of ease your way into it. Like I said, that's really how I got my start, was I just kind of kept doing it over and over again. But I think there are some good things that we can do when we start to feel those nerves sit in. And I got to say, I am in front of a lot of people quite often. But I still get nerves every single time. So no matter how comfortable I am with the people I'm around, no matter what topic I'm talking about, and I always say I'm a person, I can talk about anything. So, you know, if you want to talk about ketchup, I can have a whole conversation about ketchup. But there's always going to be those nerves. But like I said, you get to control what you do with those, and that really portrays out as well. So this is something I hesitated even thinking about sharing this, but I think it's important, especially when you're starting, is fake it till you make it. And I say I hesitated because actually I'm a big believer in not faking it till you make it. But I think sometimes when you're doing public speaking, especially when you're first starting, it is okay to start off that way. And what I mean by that is if you don't feel comfortable, pretend that you are. That really is the biggest thing. You know, and like I said, that might look like it's different things to different people. For me, I will just share if I am doing a really important presentation or, you know, something to me that is a higher level public speaking event, even if it's going and I have to go present to the city council or something like that. So a smaller group, but to me, it has kind of more oomph to it. I will dress in a way that makes me feel really confident. So for me, sometimes that means heels. Sometimes that means a blazer. Sometimes that means I spend a little bit more time on my hair and makeup, making me just feel confident. And like I said, that's totally just me. And other people have totally different things that they do that makes them feel really confident. I used to have a pair of red pants. And my coworkers used to know, like, if I came into work with my red pants, they're like, oh boy, like power pants are on today. And usually that's what it was. Like I was on a mission. I was going to get things done. So it really kind of depends. But that is the one time that I would say fake it till you make it. Because I really do believe that being authentic and being genuine is going to get you much further than anything else. Secondarily, with nerves, eye contact is really important. So obviously this setting is a little bit different, but just some simple things to keep in mind if you're talking to a group. Making eye contact is okay. In fact, I would really encourage eye contact. I think sometimes people like to kind of divert their attention or look over the crowd. But making eye contact will start to create a relationship between you and whoever you're making eye contact with, and it will actually help to calm you down a little bit. I was going through this and practicing with my daughter beforehand, and she wanted me to be sure to point out, but don't make eye contact for a creepy long time. And that's a really good point too. So usually like 3 seconds, and then you want to move on and, look at somebody else. But that is just one way to convey confidence. Whether you feel it or not, it's going to convey to them that you're confident, and that in turn is going to make you feel more confident and just help bring those nerves down. Another one is posture. And as I mentioned before, thinking back to high school, when we had to record ourselves in the public speaking, your posture tells so much about your comfort level. And I mean, just your body language in general sometimes can say so much more than even the words that you're saying. So when you're practicing, or even when you are up there, try to keep your mind really focused and thinking about, okay, what are my hands doing? Am I swaying back and forth? Just really being aware of that. I probably just have too much like heightened awareness of this now, so I can usually pick up on people right away, just of like, okay, they're feeling nervous, so we have to do something different. Example I have, my daughter has a new boyfriend, and so he came over for the first time a couple of nights ago, and I could tell he was nervous because we were just having, casual conversation, and he would keep cracking his fingers and cracking his wrists and things like that. And I could just tell he was really nervous. I'm sure he had no idea. But for me, then it made me think about, okay, how do I make this less uncomfortable for him, less awkward for him? So there are things that you can pick up on yourself, because like I said, other people are going to pick up on them too. So the more that you can be confident in who you are, what you're talking about, knowing yourself, it's just going to come across a whole lot better as well. Yeah, Morgan says that she uses her hands a lot. You can probably tell I do too. So, and I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually a really good thing to do, but I am the same way. I have friends that will tell me that they can tell that I use my hands a lot when I get excited or I'm really passionate about something. And so sometimes they'll stay away if they see my hands going too much. But yeah, I think that hand gestures actually show not that you're uncomfortable. I think it's almost that you are comfortable, just that you are able to use your whole body to communicate. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So one thing, I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but when we do get nervous, we tend to use filler words. I am aware that multiple times already I have said So like I said, it's just something that I've trained myself, that I'm aware of those things. And I am sometimes a stickler on it. I never like judge people in it, but I just am very much aware of it because I've just grown through it myself. So we were listening, actually it was to a sermon. Our family was listening to a sermon a couple of weeks ago, and the pastor that was giving the sermon, he was saying, listen a lot. And so about every other word, he would say, so listen, and would say something, and listen and say something. And that to me is a sign of just feeling, maybe like the head isn't completely all in what he was talking about, or, feeling nervous, or something was a little bit off. And so being aware of what those things are for you, of what you're saying, is really important. One thing that I was told is that when people say, a lot. And so if I say, and you get nervous, and you can do this, and that actually can be taken, first of all, can be annoying after a while. But second of all, it actually assumes that your audience knows something that really they might not know. And so people actually use it more as a filler than anything else. Like I said, being just aware of what those fillers are for yourself can be really hard sometimes. I actually am a pretty good person about receiving feedback. Not all people are. And so I would say if you are listening to someone and they want to receive feedback, or you're practicing, have a conversation first about what feedback they want to receive. If they're going to be okay to hear, like, you said that word a lot. letting them know that in advance. I think that you want to give them some feedback is really good, because some people don't respond to it well. But like I said, you can practice it on yourself, and you'll probably notice pretty quickly what words you use. Or if you ask your closest family and friends, they will tell you right away what words you use the most. So when you're feeling the nerves, I always say, number one thing, ground yourself. And that is something that you can do anytime. There's lots of different ways to do it. So if you're in a situation and you start to feel, really sweaty, or you start to feel like I'm forgetting my words, or I don't know, whatever it might be. But when you start to kind of feel those nerves take over, grounding yourself, I always say, putting your feet flat on the floor and thinking about how hard the ground feels. And, that's just a really easy way to think of grounding. But that's kind of what it means. Like, you just really become aware of your situation. Or I would say go through the 5 senses. So if you're standing in a large room full of people, just take a minute and kind of go through the 5 senses that you can. You might not be able to do taste. That's okay. But thinking about, okay, what are the smells that I have right now? What am I seeing around me? Because when you do those concrete things, it's going to kind of, like I said, focus your nerves somewhere else. It's going to take the focus off of how nervous you are. And like I said, these are things that I've had to really practice myself, because I have not always felt comfortable speaking in front of a group. I still don't a lot of times, but they're things that I really do kind of put to practice. So to wrap it up, like I said, I think a lot of these are kind of just general tips and general things that I have learned over my years of kind of putting myself out there. But that is really my number one tip. If you want to grow your public speaking skills, if you want to get better, you have to put yourself out there first. You're never going to get better. I'm sorry to say this. I'm a huge book lover, but you're not going to get better at public speaking just reading books about it. You have to go and put it in place. Or you're not going to get better at, being a singer by just watching videos about it. You have to actually go and practice that. And so that's across the board for everything. I think there's tips and tricks that you can get so that you can use to apply. But unless you're actually applying it and taking those risks, you're not going to grow. And I know there's a lot of information out there about our seniors that are graduating, and I love to read, especially like what their favorite memories are of high school or what advice they have for other people. One thing I see over and over again, and it just really made me think about how we can learn from them, is one thing I said I see a lot, that seniors are giving advice to underclassmen, and their advice as they're wrapping up their 4 years is get involved as much as you can. Take those opportunities, take a risk. And I really feel like as adults, we shut that off. We kind of get in our routine of doing our normal thing. We just kind of do what we have to do. We go through the motions, and in a way, we kind of forget how to dream and how to take those risks and how to put yourself out there. And they are all over the place. Like I said, I know for the different roles that I'm in, whenever people tell me like, I want to get more involved, I say, well, guess what? There are so many ways you can get involved, or you can, become a leader, or you can, grow your public speaking skills, because people need people to do that. And it really starts just by doing that. So I'm a really firm believer that anybody can have public speaking skills. It's a skill that some people are naturally born with. I know that, and I wish I had that too. But there's other skills that you're born with that maybe other people wish that they had as well. It doesn't mean that you can't grow in them. But like I said, I'm a big believer in education. And I think it's something that you just focus on, how do I get better for the next time? How do I grow and get better? So like I said, whoever your role model is that you look at, if you have a dream of giving a TED Talk someday, whatever it might be, I would really say, kind of just think about how you grow in your self-confidence yourself, making sure that you have your uniqueness, your authenticity out there, and then really lead and grow with that. So with that, do you guys have any questions, any comments, anything you want to share?
I have an anecdotal story about knowing your audience.
Yeah, go for it.
So when I was at University of Dubuque, I was taking a English class that was Zombies and Aliens American Literature. Part of it was we had to do a Laugh What You Want. It was actually one of the hardest classes I took all 4 years.
Wow.
So at one point we had to do a presentation on basically horror themes. And we also had to do it at another site. So I did it here at the library, which that part was fine. But then what happened was, for some reason, it was themed like themes of horror and paranormal in literature and movies and stuff like that. It was like, it's something amongst those lines for the title. And the Dubuque Lions Club somehow got word of this, and they thought it was me telling ghost stories, and they invited me out to do a presentation. And the terms crash and burn does not justify it bad enough, because they didn't understand what I was talking about, and I did not have the right audience for this because they thought it was something completely different, whereas I'm talking about symbolism of zombies in literature and stuff like that. So
That's hilarious.
That's good.
And I also want to back up Jessica Pape with the fake it till you make it. That should be stamped on everybody's forehead the day that they enter high school, because that is incredibly true. If you even just act like you know what you're talking about, it sometimes can just bleed through. And yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. Like I said, I have a hard time with it sometimes because I feel like people can fake it for way too long. But yeah, I mean, if that is what's going to get you through, I think it can kind of lead to some confidence that it's totally okay to do that.
I like Amy Cuddy's TED Talk about power poses and the psychology of, if you put yourself in a physically, commanding position, it tells your brain, like, you're confident, you can do this. So I think of that, like, if I'm nervous or something, I'll stand in a power pose and be like, okay, this is working. I believe it's working.
Yeah, and that makes you think, and I don't know if I actually learned this through yoga or something else, but even the position of your hands can show. So like if I'm standing and my palms are at my sides but like facing out, it's more of it like tells your body like I'm just open, and it can ground you that way. So I even think about like that sometimes, like just of how my hands are can make a big difference.
And tell your audience too, like what you believe of yourself. If you're gonna cross your arms, or like I do this a lot, I like hide my neck and touch my neck, and that's and I tell myself don't do that. It's a sign of I'm not as confident as I should be.
Yep. I found I play with my hair a lot, so that's why I'm like, no, stop touching the hair.
I had a quick question. Because I've done public speaking before in several different venues, but one of the ones that I struggled with the most was a PowerPoint presentation, and that was the worst. And I think it's because it was more structured, perhaps. And so that was because I guess I'm better at ad-libbing or doing off the cuff or sharing a personal story, but something kind of facts-based was a little bit more difficult. So did you have any advice for the more technical sides of things?
Yeah, I would say just from my experience, I'm probably really similar to you, Morgan. I actually prefer to wing it more than anything else. Like I really don't like to have a script in front of me. I like to just have bullets if anything else, or if nothing else. But one thing that I have found is that the less that I have on the PowerPoint, the better. Because it kind of becomes that for me. So if there are stats I have to use, like I only use the most important ones, and that's it. So I think it can be used as a visual, but I think that when we view it as it is our presentation, it takes away from us actually presenting it. And I always say if it's something that they could just receive by email and I don't actually have to talk about it, then it's not really worth my time in going and speaking about it. So I really try to make it more supplemental than anything else. And granted, like sometimes when you're sharing stats and data, you just can't, and you just have to kind of go through it. So I think just, making it maybe a portion of it, but really building around that more so.
All righty. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. And like I said, I'm by no means an expert. I just have found myself kind of putting different things out there and having to do different groups and different things like that, that have had a lot of experience. For me, I have found I still to this day get most nervous when I am in front of early elementary kids. And it's funny because I have kids that are early elementary, but I think it kind of comes back to like just knowing who your audience is, having that feedback and that type of thing. So I think, yeah, just really finding what it is that makes you feel comfortable and going with that.
Yeah, I do better with kids and with adults than I did my college class. So I was like, oh God, I'm so nervous.
See, I'm more amongst the lines of Jessica. I do a whole bunch of public presentations at the library, and the one that I dread the most every year is when I have to go to the elementary school to present the summer reading program to the 6th graders. That is always just like ripping off a Band-Aid for me. And Tim is laughing at me.
I want to say, but it's making you better, so that's a good thing. You're just growing through it. Awesome. Well, I do just want to say, I mean, if you guys ever have questions, like I said, I'm happy just to share my experiences. Like I said, I believe communication and learning goes both ways. So Paul can share out my email address with you guys if you're interested, or if you don't have it, I am more than happy to share that. But like I said, I just think it's something that even if it's, you know, you have something coming up and you're nervous about and you need someone to encourage you or cheer you on, I'm really great for that too. So that's something that we can just do, just making sure we have people in our corner all the time too.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I learned a lot and I took lots of notes, and so it's exciting.
Awesome. I'm glad. Thank you.
I also wanted to build upon something Jessica said earlier with regarding eye contact. One thing that I've often done as a trick is I will mentally divide the group into thirds, and I'll pick somebody in each group and just basically make it as if I'm just talking to those people. It can sometimes help when I'm really nervous. The other thing I would say is if you do find yourself fidgeting, like Jessica talked about playing with her hair, sometimes I figured out ways to turn what basically would be like a fidget spinner type thing into something in the presentation, such as I do a lot of presentations on the educational aspects of games. And a lot of times I'll be up there with a deck of cards, and it's just when I get nervous, I just start shuffling. And it just looks like that's part of the presentation. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I know I like to, if I have to use a microphone, I like to hold a microphone and not use a stand, probably for that same reason. It's just like something for my hands to do that gives me some security.
Okay, that brings up another question. Every time I use a microphone, I end up talking too loudly for the microphone. Do you have any microphone tips?
I would say that's on the sound person, honestly. I think that they should control that. So
okay.
But I think a lot of it too is just just being aware of the room. If you don't need to use a microphone, I don't think you need to if you're loud enough as well. I sometimes feel like that a microphone is just too much. But I would say that's more on the sound person, honestly.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Well, and you can also test to make sure if you even need the mic beforehand. If you do have a tendency to get that loud, maybe check the acoustics beforehand. See if it's even necessary.
Also a good point.
Yeah, so I used to do a weekly podcast before all of COVID broke out and we couldn't sit in our little room and social distance anymore. But they always laugh that I have a podcast voice. And so we would get in the room and we would kind of be chatting and getting ready. And then I was the MC for it. And so as soon as we're like, all right, we're live, I was like, hello. And I would get like really loud and they're like, have to like turn to my microphone quick. And they're like, every single time. I'm like, I don't even notice it anymore. I just get really excited and then my volume goes up.
Funny. Yeah, it happens.
I need to hear this. What's the podcast called?
It was through our church, so you should. They are quite entertaining, actually.
Anybody else got any questions, comments, or anything?
Well, thank you for taking the time and, looking at ways to grow or just joining in. That's awesome. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So just before everybody leaves, this is part of our adulting series where we have different classes on different things that people should probably know. If anybody has any ideas for any topics, feel free to let me know. I'm always open to ideas, especially right now with everything having to be virtual. Sometimes it cut down a few ideas that we had, but we're always trying to adjust. So if there's a topic on something you'd be interested in, just feel free to email me.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Jessica.
You bet. Have a great afternoon.